So what has happened in Idlib over the last few weeks? Why did I wait 3 years to reveal the video of my torturer? Why am I putting myself in danger once again? Well, this video is here to explain all.
We live in a world where sacrifice is rare. So when I heard the news, I had to fight the tears. Released and arrested again, that just isn't fair. And to top it all off, there's more brothers in jail. The only ones brave enough to stay and report the tale.
So let's start with a quick recap. Free Syria is split into two main territories. The northern Aleppo countryside, which is controlled by Turkey and the Free Syrian Army, and Idlib, which is controlled by HTS and its leader, Abu Mohammad al Julani. Now it's important for us to understand who Abu Mohammad al Julani is. In 2017, the US put a $10 million bounty on his head for information leading to the identification or location of Julani. But since then, Julani's iron fist had only become stronger after he and his group HTS dismantled most of the other Syrian opposition as well as other Islamic opposition groups. HTS and his tactics then became even more brutal, and soon the authoritarian grip had control over all of Idlib, with some prominent foreigners also reinforcing their ranks, amongst them some even British doctors and aid workers. And this is where, as you may remember, in the summer of 2020, I was kidnapped and held for 15 days without charge. Alhamdulillah, thankfully, I was later released after intense pressure both internally and externally from you guys. My story even being covered by the BBC. The grounds for my arrest were not clear and outrageous claims were made about me in order to blacken my name. And this was something I had expected because I'd seen this tactic employed previously on other prominent activists. But what I didn't expect was for certain people who I thought to be my friends to be in on the creation of propaganda and to come out publicly in the defense of HTS.
Best to just keep this a bit quiet, let the local authority do their thing, and he'll be out quick. Let's not damage, let's not tarnish his name. We fought and we consulted in his best interest. But unfortunately, Toxic's case was hijacked with people with sinister agendas. And this is why we have to address these sinister agendas. People have hijacked for higher bashing, for pushing forth their political agendas. And they've made it clear, and they've openly said it's not about Tox. Tox can take care of himself. It's about using Toxic's case to push forth our political agenda.
What most of you didn't know about my second arrest, but may have gathered now from the video that I released in Arabic, was that it was an act of protest and defiance for the Syrian people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed me to not only see my torturer, but be able to recognize him. And this is when I filmed this video.
السلام عليكم. هذا الشخص اسمه أبو خالد. عذبني تعذيب. عذبني تعذيب.
When I saw the man who had oppressed me, I told him to fear Allah, which resulted in him attacking me. And this led to me serving another 4 months in solitary confinement. A few days after my second arrest, Bilal Karim was arrested just for reporting what had happened to me. Freedom of speech in Idlib was gone. The right that the Syrian people had fought so hard for was now dead. And once again, the same British voices in Syria came to the defense of HTS and either claimed there was no torture, or even worse yet, some of them claimed they had a fatwa and it was halal to torture people.
Abu Mohammad al Julani, he said in his statement in regards to Muhajirin that, there's a red line. He will never hand them over. Yeah. So he's a man of honor, inshallah, and he will stick to that. Yeah.
The climate is still not right for you to hear my whole story. Inshallah, one day, me and my family will speak to you about all of the details and everything that happened to us. It's truly remarkable and unbelievable, the things that we faced. But alhamdulillah, we do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But today's story and today's video is not for that purpose. What is important for you to know now is that after I was released, despite HTS saying that they had no issues with me staying in Idlib, I was the one that chose to leave and move to the north. That choice was solely based on one thing for me, and that was the freedom to speak, the ability to command the good and forbid the evil, which is our Islamic right. So fast forward to today, and why is this all being brought up now in Ramadan? Listen carefully and remember my words, my dear brothers and sisters. Removing the foot of the oppressor, off the necks of the oppressed, is of greater precedence than giving out aid. Charity is not the solution for the ummah, but breaking free from the shackles of the oppressors is. And this is why it is imperative that I and others speak today. Right now in Idlib, in the midst of Ramadan, there are mass protests happening every night, and they are growing in intensity. For the last few years, these protests were an impossibility, as a vast clampdown had taken place on the people, as I already explained. For just writing a Facebook status in dissent, you could face imprisonment and even torture. That's how bad the situation had become. The streets were silent except for the voices of women whose husbands and sons were languishing inside HTS prisons. Everybody else was too afraid or either locked up, so they couldn't say anything. Sadly, the famous Syrian phrase, "the walls have ears," had re-arisen in Syria. This was the status quo for the last few years up until recently, when Julani suddenly began his attempts to conquer, the north from the other rebel groups. His aim was to dismantle the rest of his competition and to be the sole conqueror and king of all of the freed territories. Everything was going to plan, and he began to take more and more territory away from the revolutionaries, taking the cities of Jandaris, Afrin and even Jarablus to the east. Throughout this period though, Julani had become more and more paranoid and began a new crackdown of his own. But this time something was different. He began the crackdown within his own ranks, accusing several of his top-ranking lieutenants of being spies and working for either the Americans or even Bashar. One of the most notable and prominent names was Abu Mohammad al Julani, Julani's right-hand man. This arrest, with the seizing of all of his assets, sent the freed territories into a buzz. It was unprecedented that this could happen. This was the second most powerful man in Syria after Julani. What Julani didn't expect though was that his third in command, a man by the name of Abu Ahmed Zakur, to jump ship. Zakur was a vital member of HTS, as he was the sole liaison for the territories in the north, and he deflected as he feared that his neck was next on the chopping block. This was significant, as this was the first time that someone at this high level had gotten away and began to leak secrets. Secrets, some of them about other leaders and prominent figures who were either being tortured or had ended up being put to death in HTS prisons. Once again, this sent shockwaves through the freed territories, but the upcoming news of February the 24th sent the freed territories into an absolute frenzy. The news was of Abdul Qadir Hakim, a military commander of the group Jaysh al-Ahrar. He had been tortured and subsequently killed by HTS forces in their prisons. And when the news of this killing spread, they cumbrously tried to dispose of the body by burying it in an unmarked grave in the middle of the night. This botched job led to the most gruesome discovery yet, that of a secret graveyard with hundreds more unmarked graves, all people murdered in the prisons of HTS. And these satellite images show the pictures before and the pictures after of the secret gravesite. And these images that you see on screen now show the moment the body of Abdul Qadir Hakim was exhumed by his comrades. The people were so infuriated by what had occurred that the cloak of fear had been removed and the protests started. But this time, not just women, but prominent figures and even leaders from HTF itself came out. Many of those were those whose comrades had been taken in the previous purge by Julani. Julani, now sensing that this untapped fury could dethrone him, began frantically releasing prisoners. Firstly, he began with the HTS member who had been accused of being spies. This was to try and calm the discord within his ranks. In one of these releases of a leader from Ta'um, Julani admitted for the first time ever on camera that torture had happened under his watch.
ولما توقف ابو عبده توقف للصالح العام يعلم الله عز وجل. ابو عبده تعرض لشويه اذى في الداخل.
And this had been in total contrast to what he had said about me in the interview with the American journalist Martin Smith, where he had said that I was a liar when I gave my testimony about torture.
You have arrested, for instance, a British aid worker, Tahrir Sharif, who testified to being tortured after he was released.
لا يوجد تعذيب يعني هذا الشيء مرفوض تماما يعني بيعمل شو إعلامي هو يعني هو بيساوي شو إعلامي.
The people were still not buying it, and Julani began to release more and more activists and prisoners, pleading to the people that he had learned his lessons and would account those who had transgressed, even going so far as to purportedly arresting his own head of security and intelligence, the infamous Abu Ubaidah Munazzamat. This all came to a crescendo in the big release of Abu Mohammad al Julani a few days ago, who everybody thought was dead. This what had been spread all around the free territories. And this is where I decided that after 3 years of safeguarding the video I had filmed of my torturer, that now was the time for it to be released. You have to understand that what I did by filming this man was completely outrageous. To have filmed one of Julani's security personnel and to uncover his identity is the next level of crazy. These men are normally always masked. Their utmost priority is to hide who they are so they can get away with their oppression. But my dear brothers and sisters, like I said before, my role has always been to come here to stop the blood of Muslims being spilt, whether that's from non-Muslims or Muslims themselves. We have to clean our own home. We have to sort our own ranks. I did this all while facing multiple death threats and even attempts on my life over the last few years. All the while Julani's forces were surrounding Azaz, things were very dangerous for me and my family. But the release of the video that I just released in Arabic had two messages. One to the Syrian people in support, and the second an open challenge to Julani and HTS. That if they were sincere in making reforms, then the first person that they would account would be my torturer, Abu Khalid. And also that I should be allowed to come to Idlib and hand in my complaint in person. My final message now in English to those prominent foreigners who went out of their way to defame me, lying about me to my family, and lying to all of you watching this in support of HTS. It's time to set the record straight. Now that you know the truth and everything's been unveiled, isn't it right that as Muslims you speak the truth in order to prevent the spilling of more Muslim blood? My dear brothers, this isn't an I told you so moment, but more of a reminder to let you know we all make mistakes. Maybe you were afraid, maybe you were being pressured, but today your silence is deafening. You know who you are, we are waiting, the Ummah is waiting, and ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching.